think everyone is on. Yeah, you can continue, Mohammed. Continue with English, and then later on, the actual delivery, we can use it for in Somali.
Okay. Is it visible?
It is to me.
Okay. Abdurrashid, are you back? Yasin? Abdusalam?
Hearing you all.
Okay, I think that was, was that Abdusalam?
It was somebody.
Okay, I think it's, should we, yeah, Osmani, should we wait a few minutes for them to come, or should we continue?
Perhaps give them 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
See if I can call.
Ahmed, can I let you interrupt 1 minute?
Yes, please.
I think so, and some of the participants, or most of the participants, they are fasting. So due to the time, it's better to concise and briefly update your slides or your presentation in order to respect the fasting society or fasting persons. And also the meeting already we mentioned about the time for starting, but not mentioned the ending time. So that's also some of the other participants have some commitment. So please take consideration. Thank you for your time.
Okay. So well noted. I'll try to be as precise as possible. It's a TOT, so we just want to go through the major concepts. We don't have to, make it a complete lecture. And I'll let Isman and Michael for going forward, the ending time of the meeting and how long it will be. We can cover that towards the end when they're wrapping it up. So I will get back to I will get back to where I was. So the Revenue Authority in Somaliland, as I mentioned, has not been enacted yet. And we also discussed, why there is a trend in developing countries towards creating revenue authorities and what the objectives of governments are in doing so. It's also important to understand the unique case of Somaliland, with in discussing why it hasn't yet been implemented. Some of the key reasons that the government mentioned was the fact that doing so in the short run would require some capital expenditure, and it would increase the operating expenses of the government as a whole in the beginning, as they set up a separate organ, and in doing so would need to sort of develop its own support administrative functions, which would overlap with the Ministry of Finance. And in the short run, revenues would stay the same, whereas costs would go up. So that was one challenge. Secondly, the government mentioned that they are working with the Civil Service Commission on determining sort of a pay scale for employees of organizations such as this, which will be competing with the private sector to hire sort of the best and the brightest, and ensuring that they are paid enough that they are not going to be a risk factor in the collection of taxes themselves. Those are some of the challenges, and there are also considerations being made for the fact that there are quite a number of reform programs going on, which will help the revenue departments sort of build the capacity of their staff, and it will make it easier for them to transition. One of the programs is the current one, the domestic revenue mobilization trainings that we're providing, and there are others. So these are some of the reasons why it hasn't been enacted. Now, having said that, the key functions of the Revenue Authority, once it's up, will be firstly to do the job of both the Inland Revenue Department and the Customs Department, which is to say it will administer tax laws and assess, collect, and account for all the revenues. There's a distinction here in that currently the departments in the Ministry of Finance do not do any of the accounting. That's done by the Accountant General's Office, but in the future, both on the expenditure side and on the collection side, they would have to provide their own reporting. Similarly, they would be the tax advisors for both the central government and local government and so on, and provide them advice on what kind of taxes to implement, how to collect them, and any interventions and so on. Lastly, they would be the organization that takes people who are not paying their taxes to court, whether it's conducting investigations. Sorry, just a second. So whether it's conducting investigations and determining whether the person is avoiding tax or evading tax, like Mark was saying, and determining whether it's acceptable or they need to take them to court, into jail. And lastly, it also states that the Revenue Authority will do any other functions that the Minister of Finance asks them to do. So quite broad mandate there. Now, how will it be implemented? I won't take too long here, but the key idea is that the Revenue Authority will come up with projections for the revenue to be collected in the coming year, and they will also come up with a budget for expenditure that they anticipate they will spend in collecting those funds. That report needs to be submitted by the Director General to the board at least 3 months before the year end. And it also states that all revenues collected will be deposited into the consolidated fund. The consolidated fund here just means the central account for the government's general tax collections. There might be separate funds, like the one that I mentioned earlier on, the fund for the Edagaba Road, which was a unique fund. Similarly, the organization, the Revenue Authority, will have its own assurance department. They will conduct at least internal audit functions internally, whereas the external audit will still be done by the Auditor General's office. The structure, the proposed structure for the organization is as such. Are you able to see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
I can see your presentation.
Okay, and the cursor. Okay, so if you see here, these two, the first two departments are the Departments of Revenue, Inland Revenue, and Customs, which are going to be now both part of the Revenue Authority, are represented here. And this new department is support services. Currently, as part of the Ministry of Finance, logistics and other support services, IT, HR, are provided by the Ministry of Finance's internal resources. But once the organization is set up separately, they will have to set up a separate department and separate resources for logistics and so on. As also evident from what I said earlier, they will have their own internal audit and compliance section, whereas currently they are able to utilize this resource from the Ministry of Finance as well. And another department that is going to be new is the Secretariat, because they will have a board of directors that they will need to report to. They will have a separate secretariat for that, and that will also be where their legal department, which is going to litigate people who are evading taxes, will sit. That's the proposed structure. Now, currently, this function, the function of collecting taxes, is done by two departments within the Ministry of Finance, the Inland Revenue Department and the Customs and Excise Department. The key tasks here for them are to collect and record the taxes and to report revenue in a systemic way so that the government is able to determine or analyze how effective new tax measures are, and as well it allows the government to forecast revenues going forward, and thereby forecast what social services they can provide, what development activities they can implement. And a good measure of this is at the end of the year evaluating how successful they were at collecting the taxes that they set out to collect, and seeing how big the gap is and whether or not this is from changes in the economy or just bad practices in forecasting and so on. I keep getting a pop-up about passing over control. So I'm not sure if somebody's clicking something by mistake. Am I still? You can still see everything?
Yeah,
Yes,
still
Mohammed.
working. I'm not sure where that coming from.
Okay, then we'll move into, so the two departments that I mentioned, we'll now move into them. We'll discuss them briefly, what they consist of, the departments that, sort of the work streams that they consist of, the major work streams that they consist of. And for the Inland Revenue Department, the key work streams are these four. They're much broader, and in the workbook in 3.31, there are approximately 12 or so work streams, but these are the major ones that we've picked up. Revenue forecasting, like I've mentioned, is a critical component of what they do, which is to say that it enables the government to determine, whether it's on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, what they project to collect from existing taxes and how much that will increase, and what they project to collect from new taxes, and then sort of set up the budget for expenditure, based on that and any other revenues that they expect to receive from external sources. Secondly, the Statistics Department enables the government to analyze data on the number of taxpayers that they have, what the taxpayers are paying, what different sectors of the economy are paying, what the performance of the tax regime is as a whole. And this statistical data is used for both projections in the pricing department, but they're also used to evaluate and monitor the performance of departments and see whether or not they're meeting their set targets. Another critical important department is the Tax Clearance Department. What they do is provide organizations with a certificate that they have been paid their taxes, and this certificate is then used by companies to seek licenses. So this is now a requirement to receive your business license or your import-export license at the end of the year. You have to provide a tax clearance certificate and then use that to go to the Ministry of Trade. Similarly, the department provides exemptions for organizations that are not going to be paying certain taxes, whether they're NGOs or similar organizations, which the law provides some exemptions to. The Tax Policy Department is the department that develops or formulates legislation. They anticipate how it will impact the economy, on consumption and on savings, and then they provide that to the Director General and the Minister for further recommendation forward to the Parliament or other legislative bodies that are approving the laws. In the case of the Customs Department, the major work streams that we'll discuss are firstly the Declaration Processing Department. This department, or this work stream, are the people who, once a company brings over a container of products and they provide a declaration form saying that these are the goods that I'm bringing into the country. This is where the work is done, whereby that declaration form is checked against the goods in the bill of lading. It's checked against what's actually in the container to see whether or not the declaration is correct and accurate. From there on, it moves over to the valuation team. What they do is they use a valuation book, which is simply a register of different products and what the government values them at. There are two methods in which valuation could have been done. One option is to use the values in the invoice, the other option is to use a valuation book. And currently the government's using a valuation book which is updated annually, and that's the basis for the customs duties that are charged to the customers. Another important work stream in this department is statistics. They provide information on what are the major imports or exports from the company in the case of the Customs Department, and determine it enables the government to understand which parts of the economy are growing. For example, an increase in building materials, is to some extent can be used to determine the growth in the construction sector. And they also are able to determine the growth in exports of certain products. Somaliland is by and large major exporter of livestock, and they track the export count of each type of livestock into each country to see the performance of that that market as well. And similar to the clearance department, the exemptions department are the people who decide whether or not duties are payable on imports and if there are any export exemptions that need to be approved. Lastly, pre and post clearing is once the goods have cleared the customs department and the customs have been paid, these are people who just do some spot checks to ensure that the goods have gone through the process mandated by the law. So we went through this part earlier on. We discussed the different acts of law that have been passed, the ones that have been repealed, and the decrees and regulations. So we'll now move on to the decentralization. I mentioned decentralization earlier as a way for the government to promote autonomy of local governments and allow them to collect resources for them to provide public services to their constituents. And in the case of Somaliland, like I mentioned, there are some certain cases whereby decentralization is not effective and there are both taxes being collected at the central level and the local level, two examples of which are business licenses. For example, in Hargeisa, to operate a business, one needs to get a license from both the Ministry of Trade and a separate trading license from the local government. And these are one of the things that the government is working on to resolve, to avoid, and sort of streamline and ensure that only this is being collected at one place. Going back to the canons that Mark mentioned, it's trying to simplify and make it easier for the people to have certainty on what they have to pay, and make it easier also for them to pay instead of going to two different offices. Just collect the tax at one office. It might be the same amount in absolute terms that's currently being collected by two offices, but it's unnecessarily to duplicate the work. And another area where there's a duplication currently is in the transfer of property. There 2% taxes are collected at both the local government level and the Ministry of Finance. So in effect, it's a 4% tax on transfer of property, but it's collected at both the central level and the local level. Now, that covers Section 3. Section 4 is very brief. We will talk a little bit about the challenges facing the government. The major challenges, one of the major challenges is their IT systems. Tax collection system currently is almost completely manual, and in places where there are systems, the systems are fragmented, they're standalone systems, and this causes sometimes a problem whereby information in one system cannot be read by another system, and so in effect you have to withdraw the information from one standalone system and take it out and then manually input it into another system. So it's not necessarily as automated as you would like to see it. Good examples of these are the information in the in the customs department in Berbera. This is now automated with a system. However, other customs departments in other locations such as Loya Haddo, Wachale, Calabarid are all manual. So the authorities there are unable to use the system generated information to review it and double check it in the system. Another major challenge is around human resources. Currently, the staff are have a low level of training, and thereby they're unable to effectively implement the regulations that they have to use, or the guidelines that they're given. And also, they are not motivated in that the appraisal system doesn't differentiate between officials who are doing the job very well versus those who are not doing it so well. And this is causing overall, this low level of morale causes the poor performance of the organization as a whole. This was also one of the challenges that the ministry brought up as a limiting factor on implementing the revenue authority. The reforms that are going on in the ministry are numerous. Just to talk about a few of them, the government has currently implemented a new modality of collecting payroll taxes by focusing on the large taxpayers and registering their employees. with their contracts, they've been able to substantially increase payroll taxes collected. This is still a very narrow base. They have focused on large organizations, but in absolute terms, taxes collected have increased. So it's been successful in increasing revenues. Similarly, the government has gone on a registration sort of drive, and the new tax identification number, the forms have been published, and trainings have been provided to both public officials and the business people through the Chamber of Commerce on how to fill out the form to register oneself. And the number of businesses that have been registered in the previous year is in thousands, and the growth is substantial on a month-to-month basis. Lastly, the government's been successful in implementing the GST tax, the goods tax and the services tax, in that previously it was a 5% sales tax, but it did not include key sectors such as utilities and telecommunication. Now, with the new law passed in 2016, both of these sectors have been brought under the GST tax, and the government has started collecting 5% GST from both telecom sales and electricity billing. Thank you very much. I pass it over back to Ismail.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed, for the wonderful presentation. I appreciate you had to rush it through. And I like to take this opportunity to really apologize that, like Abdul Rashid said, didn't mention the ending time for the TOT, because of this is the first one of its kind, and we didn't know how long it will take us. So we knew that we started a good time, and we'll always finish before the iftar time. So, but I understand that some people have to schedule or have other commitments afterwards. So, but we'll fix this going forward. I think that would be all for the TOT today for Module 1 of the DRM course. I'm sure the tuition phase, so the teaching phase, will go into detail in the module, and the students, with the help of Mohammed and the co, will have better understanding of the details inside it. Yeah, I think I'd like to give Mike an opportunity to say a couple of things and formally close the TOT session.
Just before that, Mohammed, can I say that listening to your presentation made some things that I said very, very contextual. So I have a better understanding of the Somaliland environment taxes, and it's also helpful for me. Some of my examples might have been slightly modified when it'll suddenly translate through module 2 and so on. So it's been extremely educative for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all, particularly Mark, Mohammed, Osman, obviously, for that and for participating in this. I say it's been quite a long session because there's a lot of ground to cover, but I think it's been very valuable. And I think we've also learned about using the software and using the Teams for presentation as we've gone along. We have recorded these 2 sessions, and they will be put up on the tutor resources, so they're available for you as tutors, but they won't be able to be seen by students. The idea is that subsequently, when you deliver your virtual lessons, those, if you remember, please do remember, I forgot at the start, but if you remember to turn the recording on, and then they will be recorded. And this, as we went through with, Phil went through when he gave the tutorial on using Teams, if you set up the channel to start with, they will be saved in that channel, and then it'll be quite easy to upload them into the e-learning system. Okay, I think that's everything. A few of us are going to stay on to discuss some stuff about the DRM course. Osman, Mohammed, Is that all, I think? Do we need
And
Mark
Hassan.
as well? Hassan, okay, fine. Do we need Mark?
Yes, if
Yes,
you
please.
stay with us for a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, so I'll say goodbye to everybody else. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
So then, Michael, can I give you 1 minute? Because there's some clarification about the module, the scope of the module itself, and also the course duration might be, I think so. It's not balancing. Maybe the course duration is 3 months, but the module one is very precise and concise, not more than 30 pages. So how we can fix in terms of delivering the student this course?
So, yes, I mean, the students have got a very fixed amount of time with this. So I'm not quite sure what you're asking. So can you just try and repeat again?
I think, yeah, Abshid.
Yes.
Let me.
Let's see on the modules, the scope of the module, or the magnitude of the module and the time, the course duration. Might be the course duration, it takes 3 months. It takes 3 months. It will take 3 months, and the course content is very precise and concise. So how we can arrange it, because maybe the student can be feeling the boring. 3 months is within 30 pages. What is your view?
I'm going to ask Osman to answer that, really, because you've been involved in writing and teaching this more.
Yeah, I think I understand, Abdurrashid. Basically, the course is the module, not the course. The module is very short, and we have 3 months to complete. So, and I think the assumption was the assumption was that the students obviously will be working as they are also studying, and during the study, the tutors will have access to the more resources, more detailed resources. For example, when they're talking about the law, they will be discussing the laws in detail. So the discussion will take a lot longer. The module is short, yes, but the tutors will bring in more resources during the teaching sessions. So I think it will be balanced. And also, obviously, they will not be studying every day for the 3 months. That is my but I think the other modules are longer than this one.
Okay, thank you for your clarification, Usman.
Thank you.
Obviously, as this is a new course, to some extent, it's going to be learning as we proceed too.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. When are we actually going to start the teaching of this course? I mean, all the students are registered. We now have the training of trainers, so there's no reason we can't start immediately. Or do you want to wait until after the end of Ramadan? That's the question, really.
I plan we can start on May 10 around. Can start the deliver the course, or the tutors can start the courses.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I think. Thank you. I think we can, because this is, since this one is recorded, this session, we can end it as a TOT, and
Okay.
then have another meeting for the other stuff that we wanted to start.